Now, I was told, I don't know why they picked on me, but they said, do not be partisan. I thought, why would they say that to me? And they also said, remember, it's 5 minutes, 5 minutes only. And so they said nothing about whether or not we could have a fundraiser. This looks like a pretty well-heeled group. So we'll be going through here with baskets later. Do what you can. Now, I may be the only lawyer in the room who had to get the legal help of Dick Cates. I had two wonderful attorneys, John Skilton and Mark Frankel, who offered to help me in a battle I was having with the Supreme Court. I was sorry that Chief Justice Abrahamson wasn't here today because I brought a certain unity to that court. Every time I've argued before it, we lost unanimously. It seems to me that that's an important part of the effort. But that's when I knew I had a problem, is when Mark Frankel said, I think we should call Dick Cates. So I said, you mean I need Dick Cates to defend me before the court? And they said, yes. And so we called Dick, and I'm glad that we did, because as a result, we have a transcript of Dick Cates' testimony as to what it means to be a lawyer and a good lawyer and what the role of the lawyer is. And I think that's an important commitment. He said you have to have a commitment to who you believe in and what you believe in and support. We lawyers are supposed to be champions to take on any adversary. We're the ones who are supposed to walk unafraid. That's exactly what he did. He walked unafraid to take on any battle that was before him. He was, in a sense, following the advice of George Bernard Shaw, enter the poker game of life with the calm confidence of a Christian holding 4 aces. And Dick had 4 aces and he played them just beautifully. I learned that in November of 1973, Peter Rodino, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, recognized that he had lots of Ivy League lawyers but no trial lawyers. So Rodino asked Bob Kastemeyer for a recommendation, and he recommended Dick Cates. Rodino invited Dick to Washington, and when the 6'2" Lincoln S. Cates walked into the room, a judiciary staffer told me it was as if Marshal Matt Dillon had walked in to announce, boys, there's a new sheriff in town. And before he left, he straightened out everything that could be straightened out. What I learned was that Dick Cates changed the direction of the impeachment hearings. He gathered facts, he followed them wherever they went, and he told a story, as everyone knows Dick could do. He had the trust of the Democrats and the Republicans, and when he was finished telling the story that he then could return home after hearing the most important words perhaps ever uttered by a sitting president, I resign. Dick thought that training lawyers and non-lawyers, young and old, was part of his mission. A few years ago, as he appeared on the Heffernan Commission, he decided to schedule a hearing in Green Bay to talk about campaign reform. I don't think we solved all the problems of campaign financing in that particular meeting, if you look around today. But Midge Miller offered to drive her van. Dick Cates and I joined Midge and Nat Heffernan in that van. With Midge driving, Nat in the passenger seat, and Dick behind Nat, driving 3 hours up to Green Bay and 3 hours back, Nat and Dick exchanged stories. Midge and I remained silent. I felt like a guest on a talk show waiting to get a word in edgeways, but could not. If Dick could keep Midge Miller and I quiet for 6 hours, you know he was a hell of a storyteller. He was, as Gaylord Nelson said, a steadfast advocate for the rights of the common man. He was hardworking, responsible, thorough, creative, and highly intelligent. Bob Kastemeyer said Cates served selflessly and effectively. The nation owes its eternal gratitude to Dick Cates, and I agree, and so do you. We always enjoyed the Madison Symphony, but especially when Marnie was singing in the choir. Dick was always proud of this gracious and lovely woman. Marnie and Dick Cates were a heck of a team. Dick Cates, brilliant strategist, great storyteller, marvelous trial lawyer. He made our legal system better. He made all of us better. He took his responsibility seriously, but he had time to laugh, and we all joined in that laughter. This is a man that we are all proud of. We know that we are better people because of him. Thank you.
I can almost see My baby feels lost with no direction. I fade to shaking. I gotta keep my head held high. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make a move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. Struggles I'm facing, the chances I'm taking. Sometimes knock me down, but though I'm not racing, I may not know it. But these are the moments that I'll remember most, yeah. Just gotta keep going. I gotta keep my head held high. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make a move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes we're gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb.
Right up. All right, I'm Bob, the fifth child. Honored and speak the after my father.
Is that baby?
Right on. We've heard wonderful talks. We've heard beautiful, beautiful music. And we've seen great pictures. And it's so nice to have all you people here to cherish in the life of my father, and our father. We have just a few more talks. The downside is my brother John is next. And it seems like we're almost done, but I've never, ever seen him tell a short story. So we may be here for a while, so just relax. I was given a book by my oldest son, Charlie. It's called Season of Life. It's written by Jeffrey Marks, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's about two men that coach a high school football team in Maryland and how they take on the task of changing the kids on the team. These kids come from all different walks of life, changing them from boys to men. These two coaches focus not on their athletic talent, but on the kids' ability to develop relationships and have a cause bigger than themselves. They teach the boys to love each other, and they teach the coaches to love the boys. They teach them how to maximize their God-given talents. They teach them that being a man means accepting responsibility, leading courageously, having empathy, having integrity, living a life of service to others. This sounds to me like they're describing my father. In the end, for all of us, they feel, it comes down to this if you were a man. What kind of father were you? What kind of son were you? What kind of husband were you? What kind of brother were you? What kind of friend were you? Dictates had a profound effect on the lives of many of us here today. For me, it's because he was my father and has matured. It's because he became more of my friend. When I was 12, I too rode my bike up to the cottage with my brother David, who was 4 years older than my father. I rode my brother John's blue Schwinn 3-speed, because I didn't have a big boy bike yet. And And we put our camping gear, our clothing, and our food on back to the bikes we went. It was an exciting moment in my life. But as we got north of Wanakee, going through Lawton, going through the hills, and I scrambled to attempt to stay with my brother David, but wasn't near strong enough, and got ahead of my father, I realized that I was on the road alone. I couldn't see anyone in front, and I couldn't see anyone behind. I was scared as a little boy, and I stopped my bike, put my feet down, and started to cry. But soon my father came up behind me, and he asked me how I was doing, and I told him of my concern that I took a wrong turn or missed, didn't know where I was, and I didn't know if I could make it. And he really had the opportunity to say, all right, suck it up, quit being a baby, get on your bike, run. But he took a different approach. And he said, it's okay, Bob. We're almost to the next town. When we get there, we'll get some food, a bite, and Coke. We'll just stay behind me, go a little slower. Just go left foot in front of right. And we got to the next town, the next town, the next town, the next town. And pretty soon we're up at the cottage. He taught all of us how to work a day. Put a full day in, put left foot in front of right. This I thought about many times in my life. Countless times, countless hours, countless times I was in the emergency room late at night on call. 2 in the morning, finishing admitting someone. Thinking, I can finally go to bed. Maybe I'll get a few hours of sleep. Got another day tomorrow. And the ER doc comes around the corner and says, hey, Bob, we got another one for you. And so it's times like this, when I refer back to my father's words, it's times like those times when I go back in college, I was kind of a science math nerd, and I did fairly well my first year of college, and by the end of my first year, I thought, well, maybe I should go to med school or something like that. So I kind of dedicated my life to do that, and then I was going to a small school out east, and part of the job, part of the responsibility of going to school is I had to take religion and art courses to get through. And I wasn't as good at those by the end of my sophomore year. And that second semester, I didn't quite do as well in school, and I was frustrated and concerned, and I wasn't going to make it in med school because of this. And I came back home to the farm, and my report card came in the mail, and we opened it up, my dad and I looked at it, and I was frustrated. And he could have said, you know, Bob, I'm paying all this money to send you to private school. You're blowing it. You know, you got one shot. What are you going to do with it? But instead, he looked at me in the eye and said, Bobby, it's okay. You can still do this. And it was pretty subtle, but you know, knowing that he was behind me just allowed me to pursue my dreams. Worked out. In residency, my wife and I went to North Carolina. We had 2 boys there. And residency was a wonderful but very arduous time in my life. I spent 3 years averaging well over 100 hours a week working throughout that time. And I remember coming out of the hospital, walking through the parking lot on my way home, looking at all these fancy, expensive cars that the attending physicians drove, and wondering one day would I have something like that. And I remember my mom and dad had come to visit us and the boys. And I looked at it and talked to my dad. I said, God, these attendings have the greatest cars. It would be so cool. I can't wait till I'm done with this residency program. I can actually get a job and make enough money and buy something like this. And he looked me in the eye. He said, don't forget who you are. Remember where you came from. Working these horrendous hours, all these sacrifices at school and so on, it's not about the money. It's not about making a lot of money. It's not about buying cars. It's about you trying to become a great physician. Dick Gates was a great father. He was a great son. He was a great husband. If the Marine Corps was his brotherhood, he was a great brother. As many of you know here, he was a great friend. Clearly, my father was the greatest man I've ever known.
Our sister Christine speaks English, but not through the tears. So I'm with her. Christine wrote this for all of you. She's asked me to read it. Dad bought the Spring Green Farm in 1967 for his love of country, ethics of hard work. He created summer jobs for his sons and their friends. He also knew my passion for horses, and this created a very strong bond between Dad and me. Dad loved musical soundtracks for movies and played the albums all the time, from The Sound of Music to South Pacific, but I believe Camelot was his favorite. He had Paint Your Wagon on 8-track in his farm truck, and I'd go out in the driveway and sit in that truck and listen to it over and over. Together we listened to all of them going to and from the farm. I've passed on that love for musicals to my 4 daughters, and now to my granddaughter and grandson. My dad always had a love of baseball. I remember one time when my husband John and I had a catalog of sports teams' jackets. We found a Brewers jacket and ordered one for Dad. Either we forgot to sign the card, or he never saw who the gift was from, or he lost the card. When my dad opened the package and saw it was a Brewers jacket, he pretended to believe the Brewers sent this to him. And they were recruiting him. No mention was made of this to us, so after months of not hearing from him, we called to see if he had received the jacket. When he found out it was from us, he just laughed and laughed. We sort of felt bad for him that we burst his bubble, but as always, Dad found wonderful humor in everything. He had to have a sense of humor when he drove our big animal hauling farm truck from Memorial High School to West High School with 20 to 25 high school girls screaming and chanting Memorial fight songs before a big football game. Not many dads would have endured that night, but that was my dad. Being the only daughter, we had a different bond than he had with his boys. But he loved me so much, and he was the love of my life. He was my provider, my biggest supporter. My dad taught me laughter as the most important avenue for getting through life. For that, Dad, I will be eternally grateful. Thank you, Dad. We are a very lucky family to have had you in our lives. I'll always love you, Dad. You will be my hero forever.
This is in response to my brother Bob. My name is John Bob. We were talking about the length of time we would talk. As Ed talked about the 5 minutes, that I found it ironic because, as you all know, my father loved to tell stories, and I don't think in my entire life I ever saw his mouth open and words begin to come out that it didn't last at least 5 minutes. With words, with phrases such as the fact of the matter, or words like essentially, which would come through his never-ending ah. Sometimes the words after the ah would last, the space would last so long that you'd be hanging on that ah, waiting for the word to come out. And I think Olson has a story about when my father was settling a case and the guy kept putting money in his hand, and every time he'd say it, Dad would go, ah, and then more money would go on. By the time he got something out of his mouth, the case was done. In any event, there are a million stories, a million things about my father. It takes days and days and days for us to reminisce all the marvelous things he did and the way he believed, things he believed in. I'm just going to tell a couple stories. One was that in 2003, I went to Europe to have my hip done. At that time, they were doing a procedure in Belgium that they weren't doing in the United States. And what they made it very clear to me was that I had to bring someone with me who could act as my nursemaid. Well, the person that really wanted to go was my dad. Now, being a nursemaid is not in the definition of Dick Cates. He doesn't know how to be a nursemaid. But I knew he really wanted to go because he would get to go on an adventure, we'd get to laugh a lot, and he'd get to exercise because he had nothing else to do. So we get to Belgium, and I check into the hospital on Tuesday night, and Wednesday I have my procedure, and Thursday morning I get up, and they get me out of bed. And I'm sitting in this chair. This is the first time I've been out of bed. I don't have any crutches or anything. This is the first time I see Dad since I've gone into the hospital. He comes into the hospital room, and he sits down, and he says, "John," he doesn't say anything about how's your hip. He just says, "John, you should see, I just swam for like 2 hours, and I walked all over the town." And he's telling me all this stuff, and I'm sitting there listening. And then he goes, "Oh, you know, I just don't really feel like it. I think I gotta go to the bathroom." I said, "The bathroom's right there." So he gets up, and my dad had very low blood pressure, so a lot of times when you get up, you feel a little faint. Well, he gets up, he walks into the bathroom, and all of a sudden I hear the boom. So now I can't get out of the chair, and I feel like these people in wherever I am. My dad fell down. My dad fell down. So they come rushing in, and there he is. They open the door, and he's knocked out on the floor of the bathroom. He's hit his head on a pipe, so his head's bleeding. They bring him out. They stick my nursemaid in the bed next to me. So then I'm sitting here looking at him, and he's, coming to, and he's kind of really funny. He's like, "Whoa, what is going on?" So in any event, they wheel the bed down to the emergency room, and then they take him up to the 5th floor for observation. So my nursemaid's in the hospital on the 5th floor, I'm in the hospital on the 2nd floor. Well, that day I get some crutches, I start walking up and down the hallways, and lo and behold, I see a wheelchair. I don't know whose it is, but I steal it. It's about 9 o'clock at night. And I steal it so I can go visit my father in the hospital. So I find out what room he's in. I go up there, and there he's laying in this room. There's this guy in the bed next to him. I swear to God, the guy's hacking and hacking and hacking. And he's farting and farting and farting. And Dad's laying there and goes, "God, if I'm not sick now, I'm going to be when I get out." So then the two of us get checked out of the hospital at exactly the same time, 11 o'clock on Friday morning. And in Belgium, you have to go to the checkout spot. So we're sitting here, and we are laughing so hard. He's got these staples in his head, and he wants to show it to everybody, even though they can't speak English. So then we go across the street to the Holiday Inn, and there we stay. And in any event, the next day is Saturday. And we have this big plan to go down into Ghent and see things and have dinner. But by now, Dad's really, really sore. He can barely move his neck and his shoulders from the fall. So as we're starting to decide to go, he says to me, "Hey, Pop, can I borrow one of your crutches? So how do you say no to your nursemaid? So I give the crutch to my nursemaid. And there we are, the two cripples walking down the street. And he's always like 15 feet behind me. But in any event, my wife had made this arrangement that there would be someone at the Amsterdam airport waiting for me because she didn't know how I'd be. Thank God they were there because of Dad. But so we have to take the train from Ghent up to Amsterdam. He can't carry the bags. So I got one crutch and I've got both bags up and down the platforms in the railroad station. He's behind me, and when we finally get to our hotel, he takes a nap. But we really, really had fun, and he wrote me this letter afterwards telling me it was just, he thanked me and thanked me and thanked me for taking him, and what a lovely time he had. Now, there was another story that I have that I'm going to tell because I think it kind of exemplifies who he is and what he was. And this story was told to me by David. David's second daughter, Margie, was graduating from a high school out in Michigan, and David is from Montana, so he's driving across the country, and he picked up my mom and dad to take them to Margie's graduation. And they're going to take the ferry across the Lake Michigan. And what, I don't know if they're on the ferry or on the loading dock, this guy, you know, my dad's like 80 at this time, but this guy comes running up and saying, Dick Cates, are you Dick Cates? And my dad doesn't know who he is, but you know, but you know, David and Dad acknowledge that he's Dick Cates, and he says to David, are you his son? And David says, yes. And he says, you want to know how I know your dad? And Dave says, yeah, how? He says, well, a long, long time ago, I was playing baseball against him, and I was on second base. And there was this hit out in the outfield, and your dad was catching. And I came around third, and I was going to score. But as I approached home base, the ball came in before me, and your dad caught it. So I put my shoulder down, and I was just going to ram it. And the next thing I knew, I was flying through the air, did a somersault, landed on my back in the dirt, and I looked up, and I saw the umpire say, you're out, and I saw your father standing over me going, not this time, Johnny. And the reason I tell that story is because, really, my father was an amazingly tough man. And when he went to doing a job, it got done. It didn't matter how menial, it didn't matter how meaningless. He put his heart and soul into everything, and he always maintained his principles. But if you were ever trying to beat him,